Hello, I'm Diego Cardoso. I'm a postdoctoral researcher here at the Institute of Economics and Econometrics, part of the Geneva School of Economics and Management at the University of Geneva. I'm an applied microeconomist interested in environmental and natural resource economics and industrial organization. And in particular, I'm interested in prospective policy analysis in the domains of climate change and water, and occasionally the intersection of those two. And my research agenda focuses on understanding the effects of proposed environmental regulation and specifically how that type of policy is going to affect markets, it's going to affect environmental outcomes. And I tend to emphasize characteristics and features of specific sectors, of specific institutions, and understand how those features affect the outcome of such policies. Illustrative of this type of research, I have an ongoing project that studies how we set carbon taxes when we have an oligopoly. In specific, I look at how we choose what the optimal carbon tax is going to be for aviation. So economic theory tells us that climate change is coming from an externality, which means that there's an external cost that is not paid by the airlines, it's not paid for by the customers, but to a third party, in this case, future generations affected by climate change. And theory will tell us that we can address that externality by setting a tax, or a Pigouvian tax, at the rate of the size of that externality. In this case, for climate change, we have estimates, that's the social cost of carbon. In fact, this is an idea that has been pushed for and advocated by experts in this industry. But the problem here is that aviation is not exactly following the setting of the standard Pigouvian taxation, because that assumes the market has only one distortion, and that's the externality. But aviation is far from that perfect competition scenario. And there are two features I focus here. One is that this is an oligopoly. There are few airlines, they have market power. Second, this is a sector that is already taxed. So in order for us to understand what to do here, we have to understand what's the effect of those two features. And I study that, even though theory will tell us that then the optimal carbon tax should be smaller than the social cost of carbon, we don't know by how much. So I combine an empirical framework, modeling the industry, and also a second best optimal taxation model to understand the relative size of those distortions. And I do find that the optimal carbon tax should be substantially smaller than the social cost of carbon. And that's in part because the taxes are already there, and they're doing part of what we intended for the carbon tax. But that's not the whole story. We could do better. We could reform the way we tax this sector by moving away from sales tax to an input tax, and that would incentivize more fuel-efficient flights and decrease emissions per passenger.